9.3 deals with fishery science. So there's an entire branch of science that deals exclusively with managing fisheries. It used to be said that the ocean offered us an inexhaustible source of fish to eat, that we'll never run out of fish in the ocean. But modern technology, the way that we catch fish and the effort we put into catching fish in our modern times has made that statement obsolete. And we are in real danger of overfishing the ocean. Now, the main term that a fishery scientist is concerned about is what's called the maximum sustainable yield. The maximum sustainable yield is the number of target species of fisheries can take without jeopardizing the future populations. So this means it's the total number of tuna we can take without, we want to take just enough tuna to leave enough behind to reproduce and replenish the stock. That's the concept of a maximum sustainable yield. Now, overfishing is taking more of a species than the maximum sustainable yield tells us. The Food and Agricultural Administration estimates that 70% of the worldwide fish stocks are being overfished currently. And that's an awful lot. That means most fish are depleting or being overfished. And the response from the industry has not been too encouraging because there's a continued demand for fish on the market. So what the fishing industry has done is they've become more efficient and even better at taking declining fish stocks. So this is a big concern because we're overfishing already depleted stocks of fish. Now, there's particular species that we fish for that are of concern. Sardines and anchovies, for example, are being overfished, and those are low on the food chain, and there's concern about that because if we take too many sardines, then we're declining the food source for higher predators such as tuna and sharks and other bigger fish. We're also allowing for the proliferation of smaller organisms. Anchovies, for example, are filter feeders of plankton, and this could allow for more plankton to bloom in the ocean, leading towards more harmful algal blooms and red tides and other things. Now, another concern with overfishing is bycatch. Bycatch results when we catch things that we don't intend to catch. For example, in this picture you see here, we see a lot of dolphins have been caught in this big purse seine that was used to catch tuna. And this, of course, is bad for the dolphins because they could end up being stranded and killed. But it's also a big waste because sometimes we can catch other fish. If you're going out to catch tuna and you catch a swordfish, you're not getting paid to catch that swordfish, so you just throw it back. So it ends up being a big waste, and 25% of the worldwide fish catch is bycatch. That means 1 in every 4 fish caught by the industry is a waste. So again, the efficiency of that is not so good. You may have seen this on a can of tuna. It's called a Dolphin Safe label, and this is a label that's put on fishery products that use nets that allow dolphins to escape so that they're not killing dolphins. But of course, that's just one small example of bycatch. There's a lot more out there that we need to be concerned about. Now, because of this problem, there's been recommendations for sustaining the world's fisheries because they are in some danger. There was actually a Pew Ocean Commission formed, which was a group of scientists, wildlife advocates, politicians, and others. Together, they made 4 recommendations that we make it the principal objective of U.S. fisheries policy to protect marine ecosystems. So we need to protect essential habitats so these fish can have a place to breed and so forth. We want to protect their nurseries. Secondly, create an independent government agency that's responsible for managing ocean resources. Invest in more marine research over the next 5 years, doubling the current funding. So again, that goes in towards paying salaries and so forth of fishery scientists. So this might be an interesting field for you to get into. And establish a network of marine reserves or protected areas. In fact, Guana, which is a National Estuarine Research Reserve where we went on our field trip, is a beneficiary of one of these 4 recommendations. Well, what is fisheries management then? What is it a fishery scientist does? Well, we want to first of all talk about how we manage these fish. What makes them a renewable resource? Well, the fact has to do with their carrying capacity, the number of fish that can live in a certain area. And if there's a carrying capacity, there's always going to be surplus production, meaning that fish produce more offspring than survive to adulthood or that survive the carrying capacity. And if we take a look at this graph that we see here, notice this is a population curve. And as we go up that curve, sometimes we have an overshoot above the carrying capacity. In other words, we have more fish that can actually survive in this habitat. This is the key here. We want to catch those because if we're just catching the overshoot, we're maintaining the carrying capacity and not harming the environment. That is the ideal source. That's the concept of a maximum sustainable yield. So the goal of fishery biology is to establish or estimate the amount of fish that can be safely removed while keeping the fish population healthy. That's what a fishery scientist does. So protecting the habitat is important because more habitat means more fish. So not only do we want to protect and learn about the fish, but we want to protect the habitat as well. So fishery managers usually are involved in what's called stock assessment. Now a stock is a harvested or managed unit of fish. So you have stocks of tuna, stocks of redfish, etc. The result of a stock assessment is a report on the health of the stock and recommendations for protecting it. The Magnuson Act requires that all fish stocks be assessed and determined whether or not they are being overfished. And some things that stock assessment involves is learning as much as possible about the biology of the fish, learning about the fishing activities for that particular fish. So there's a twofold thing here. We want to learn as much about the fish, and we want to learn about the humans that are going after the fish. Another important term in stock assessment is CPUE, which stands for catch per unit effort. And effort is basically the amount of time and netting and fishing hooks that go into the ocean. It's how hard are we working to catch the fish, and of course catch is the number of fish that you get, or landings is the amount of fish caught per year. Effort can be expressed as vessel days, which would be the number of 24-hour days a boat spends out on the water, or even hook hours. And the key thing that we look for in stock assessment is a decline in this catch per unit effort because it indicates a decline in the stock or overfishing, and that's a key point there. One really bad thing we want to avoid is what we call recruitment overfishing, which is catching fish before they've had a chance to spawn. In other words, catching babies. That's why we have size requirements on fish. You ever go fishing, you cannot keep a fish that's under a certain size. If we catch the recruits or the juveniles before they've had a chance to spawn, then that's really going to decrease the population. So we protect spawners by closing seasons and making marine protected areas and so forth. Now, as a fishery manager, knowing the relationship between age and length of a fish can help us to understand its growth rate and mortality. One important graph that a fishery scientist uses is the length at age key, which is a graph used to estimate the age of a fish based on its length. If we take a look at here, let's say we know that fish at 3 years of age are starting to reproduce. If we trace the graph up to this area, we come over to an average length of about 16 inches in length. So as a fishery manager, you might want to say, wait a minute, we don't want to catch anything below 16 inches because it hasn't reached sexual maturity yet of the 3 years of age. So we want to protect these fish, all these guys down here. These guys we can go ahead and catch because they've had a chance to spawn. So it's safer to catch these guys but not those guys. Now an age structure is what we see here. The age structure is a graph that shows the percentage of age cohorts or groups in a stock. So these are all the age cohorts here, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. And they show us a couple of interesting things. First of all, we can tell that the stock becomes fully recruited at 2 years of age. These are all your recruits, okay? So this is still increasing. They're not being caught because they're too small. So they're fully recruited, and of course we can see a decline in age cohorts as they get older, and that makes sense because more fish die as they're older. So there's very few 11-year-olds and so forth. So this is the natural shape of an age structure. It's kind of almost an exponential curve going in the opposite direction. So here is another age structure. We can see here, this is when it is fully recruited, and we can see that natural decline. We can see these fish can live to 36 years of age. But one thing we notice is here, this is not good, because what's happening here is recruitment overfishing. We're catching too many babies, and that's not good. We don't want to catch the little ones. We want to catch the big ones. So that is just kind of a little bit of a overview of stock assessment and what you'd be doing if you were a fisheries scientist.